This is Fortress News with Jake Zabel.
Hello and welcome to Fortress News. I'm your host, Jake Zabel, and join with me today is our special guest, Donna Purcell from Cherish Life. Donna, do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Donna Purcell. I'm currently the State President of Cherish Life Queensland.
Just for the listeners first, what does Cherish Life do as an organisation?
Well, essentially we're an educational and a political lobby group. And we started back in the 1970s for that purpose, to educate about on abortion and, to promote a respect for human life from conception to natural death is actually our constitutional motive. And that's what we've been doing ever since. Yes.
So, for the listeners, I've got Donna on to help talk about the new abortion laws in Queensland. So, for those listeners who are unaware, last Wednesday, that is the 17th of October 2018, the Queensland Parliament voted on a bill known as the Termination of Pregnancy Bill, which passed with a 51 in favour, 41 against and 1 abstaining. So that means the bill has passed and the laws surrounding abortion in Queensland have now changed. To talk about those changes is why I've brought Donna on. So Donna, how does this new bill change the current abortion laws in Queensland?
Well, essentially the purpose of the bill was to decriminalise abortion. That means to take it out of the criminal code and allegedly to be treated as purely as a health issue. We had a lot of problems with that because although the unborn child is not fully recognised as a person to be protected by the law until they're born, however, it is the only other recognition in the law by abortion having been criminalised, or in the criminal code, it gave a recognition that there was something to protect. And now that has been removed. So abortion is legalised for any reason up to 22 weeks, and beyond that, legalised with the permission of 2 doctors for a range of what we generally call psychosocial reasons, including possibly the woman's future circumstances, not just their current ones. So it's a very broad bill, and it changes the status of abortion in Queensland that has remained this way for a very long time. It's now very much changed.
So prior to this bill, abortion was illegal in Queensland?
It was illegal. It was officially illegal, except to where the woman's mental or physical health was seriously affected by the pregnancy. However, we know that those words were not observed, and abortion was done more widely than that. However, that was the result of what we call the Maguire ruling in the 1980s, after a raid on an abortion clinic and the subsequent case law around the issue.
So this new bill allows a woman to terminate the pregnancy for any reason up until 22 weeks. Does that includes then things like if she doesn't want the gender, so sex selection abortion is fully covered in that?
Well, that's right, because they're not obliged to give a reason for the abortion, or there's no reason that would not be illegal under this bill. Then yes, that could happen, and it may not even. It may not. The couple may or woman may go to an abortion clinic and present as having some other reason, whereas sex selection is at least one of the reasons, or the more important one for them. How the government kept commenting that for doctors to do a sex selection abortion was unethical, and it was covered under other obligations by doctors. However, there's nothing in the bill itself to prevent that happening. As I said, because they may not even admit to that. It may be a reason, not the reason given for it.
But just to clarify then, so after 22 weeks, a woman couldn't use sex selection as an excuse to get an abortion?
Well, it would be a lot harder because, yes, they would have to go and state their reasons to doctors, and that would be a lot harder. However, I must say that this legislation is modelled very closely on Victoria, and we know in Victoria, sometime after this legislation passed there in 2008, that a doctor was taken to one of the doctor's sort of ethical bodies called AFRA, because he refused to refer a couple for a sex selection abortion. So it could happen. I mean, not all doctors may be obligated. They may not all feel obligated by that ruling, particularly if they come maybe from the same cultures as the people often requesting sex selection abortions come from. They may feel that sort of obligation as a result of their upbringing.
So, after the 22-week mark, a woman would still be able to get an abortion up until birth, as long as she gets recommendation from 2 doctors.
Well, yes, that's right. That's what essentially the law would allow her. And once again, we pointed to examples from what's happened in Victoria since their legislation was passed. That at least in the first couple of years after the legislation, I think it was 2010 and 11, there was even an abortion recorded at 37 weeks of pregnancy, and something like about 10 from about 28 or 30 weeks onwards. So when we pointed that out, they sort of refused to follow it. They said that we're exaggerating. And we know in Victoria, half of the abortions are occurring now, up to 2015. The late term abortions I'm talking about are for these what they call psychosocial reasons. The other reasons might be the usual ones where a woman has a serious illness, or the unborn child's affected by some form of serious or fatal abnormality.
So, with this new bill, did it have any kind of protections for conscientious objectors to abortion?
That section is for doctors who conscientiously objected to providing for an abortion or being asked to refer, and the bill allows, the act, the legislation allows them to themselves and say that they have a conscientious objection, but under the bill they're required to refer to somebody else who, as far as they know, does not have those objections.
So basically it's you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but you have to refer us to somebody who will.
That's according to the legislation, yes.
Okay. With a lot of these abortion bills, there's generally people talk about buffer zones. Was there any law included in this bill regarding buffer zones?
Yes, in the legislation that's referred to as safety zones, they called it that. And yes, there was legislation covering both quite a range of activities, such as sort of talking to anybody going to acquire an abortion, or in some form of protest, or giving the material, anything like that could be covered as an action outside an abortion clinic for up to 150 metres from it.
So you can't even just talk to somebody about what they're doing?
Yes, considered to be illegal too, that's right. Yes.
Sounds kind of like a restriction on free speech, but...
Yes, well, apparently, actually, there is a case before the High Court exactly on that grounds where 2 different people in 2 different places were charged with going against the laws of the safety zones in those states. One was Tasmania, one I think was Victoria, and they took it to the High Court to protest on the grounds of freedom of speech, and that was actually only just heard last week, just before the bill. The same same week as the bill was passed. However, those decisions can take some months to come down.
Okay.
So we won't know that for a little while.
One other thing that I saw about this bill was that with the abortions, they can now be performed in just a public hospital now. Is that correct?
Up to this legislation provisions, there were already provisions for being performed in public hospitals, but they usually took place after 22 weeks for those reasons that we were talking about, so the serious either health or mental health of the mother.
Okay.
So the government say they do not anticipate a change in that situation, so they still expect that most abortion up to 22 weeks will be covered mainly in public hospitals, and afterwards after 22 weeks in private clinics, and after that in public hospitals.
Okay.
But the time will tell.
Yeah.
Tell whether that actually will actually change or not.
The bill was voted and passed on the 17th. When will this be enacted into law? Will that be soon, or do we have a couple months, or when are we to expect this?
It's usually fairly quick, unless there was some form of challenge to it. It's a bit difficult to know on what grounds it could be challenged. And that is the job of it's the task of the governor to sign it into legislation as an act of Parliament. So I'd expect that by the end of the week that would happen this week.
I think we've covered most of the stuff that's been legislated in the bill. Do you know of any other important facts that our listeners should be aware of regarding this new bill?
Well, probably not so much about the bill, but I think if they listen to this program and they feel, like many of us do, very angry and disappointed about it, that they shouldn't just shrug their shoulders and think, well, that's the end of it. We'll keep working at it, and I'd encourage them to get involved in the organisation and in different levels. And they can do that by going on our website, becoming a member, or getting our email newsletters, and becoming involved in that respect, in that way. And also getting involved in your local church and keep talking about it and educating people.
So our listeners can find Cherish Life. What's the web address for them to look up?
It is www.cherishlife.org.au.
Cool. Thank you, Donna, for coming on and informing us about this new abortion law in Queensland.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's quite a sad time, and it's not one of the happiest topics to invite a guest on to talk about.
No, that's right, exactly, but we have to keep persevering in it. Because so many women, with many things times we said to the government, so many women do not want to have an abortion, but the circumstances or the people around them who push them into it so many times, that's what happens. And that's what the other reason for having a more restricted law, it actually protects not only the unborn but also the mothers as well, because they have no comeback if it becomes so widely available and so easily available.
Well, the best thing I think we can do at this time is to pray to God that He will grant our politicians and leaders some wisdom in regards to these laws, and that hopefully there may be some better laws in the future.
Yes, well, I think it's up to people. The other thing people can get involved in political parties. Don't leave it to those who push these things through, because that's how it happens. It's pushed through and it's treated as it becomes a party policy, and so whether they have a conscience vote or not, many of them feel constrained to use their conscience vote to vote for it and against their conscience.
Well, that's probably just one last important thing to ask. Did the Labor or Liberal parties allow a conscience vote in this recent vote?
They all allowed their members a conscience vote.
Mm-hmm.
And however, it is ALP party policy to support this, to to decriminalise abortion. It has been their policy for quite some time, and a resolution was made, I believe, last year in their state conference to, achieve it in this term of the government, and that's what they've done. So they set out to do it. It didn't just happen. The Liberal Party, or the Coalition, or LNP, their policy as a party was not to change the legislation to keep abortion in the criminal code, and that is what most of them voted for with their conscience vote, but 3 LNPs people actually voted for the legislation.
Well, thank you for coming on, Donna, and I hope my listeners have at least enjoyed hearing this information, and you guys can listen to me again next time. I've been your host, Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.